Man, what a great song to illustrate how fast life goes. Isn't that a good song? You say, my wife makes fun of me sometimes because I really like country music. But I tell her there's some really good philosophy in country music. Not all of it, just like there's good and bad with about any genre. But in this song here, Kenny Chesney takes a basic truth of life, that life goes by so fast, and he makes a great song out of it. Now, he's not the first one to do that. In fact, how long ago would you guess this song was first put out? It's been 13 years since that song is. That illustrates the fact, doesn't it? Life goes by really fast, because it seems like just 5 years ago that song was out. But King David wrote a song with the same theme, over 2,000 years ago. And in Psalm 39, David gets into some deep philosophy about life, about death, and about the hereafter. And I think it's good for us once in a while to just push back from everything else we're doing, all the plans we have, all the busyness we have, and just take a look at some deep things of life, like we read in Psalm 39. We're going to look at three great truths of life. And as we read the song that David wrote in Psalm 39. We're going to start with verse 4. And this is one of the lyrics that David has in this song. Show me, O Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting is my life. Let me know how fleeting is my life. There's the first great truth to hang on to, and that is that life is fleeting. Now, I was born in 1960. Is anybody here older than me? And ladies, if you are, you don't have to admit it, okay? But 1960, and I think what was going on around the early 1960s, and I was going to first grade in about 1966, and we had something that was going on. We always did current events. Remember current events? You'd study what's happening around you, something you hear in the news, and you talk about it in class. Oh, we were studying things like the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. We talked about things like Woodstock, and I don't even ask people if they were at Woodstock anymore, because if you were, you don't remember it anyway. But all these things are going on in the 60s, and it was current events. And then I grew up, I went to high school, went to college, got married, had my own kids. My own kids started going to school, and they would come home and say some weird things like, hey, Dad, guess what we were studying in history today? The assassination of John F. Kennedy, Woodstock. And I'm going, no. You kids don't understand. Those are current. No, that was 25 years ago. Where did those 25 years go? How fast can 25 years go? It hit me again one day. My wife and I were in the front of our house and we were cutting down a tree. We had planted it, after her father had passed away, and it was in honor of him. And the tree grew, and we had it out there for several years. And then we had to cut it down because it died. But we started counting the rings. And we got out to about 15 rings. And my wife had this great question. She says, boy, what was going on 15 years ago? Oh, when we went back, said, well, the kids were this age, and we started talking about the space shuttles, and we started the different things going on 15 years ago, but then we carried it out further. What was going on 15 years before that? I said, oh man, we were just getting married, and we started naming things, and we just kept going backwards 15 years before that. And that's a great game to play till it gets scary. And then we turned it around and said, what do you think will be happening 15 years from now? How old will we be? Will we still be working? Will we be retired? Where will the kids be living? Those kind of things. And it was a great time for us just to discuss time. But it had me thinking, if you break time down, if you break your life down into 15-year segments, if you talk to an insurance guy, he'll tell you about mortality tables, and he'll say, the average man or woman, on average, will live somewhere around 75 years. That's 5 15-year segments, okay? Now, with me being 60, I'm going into my fourth one now of those 15-year segments. And I think, don't blink. I think life is fleeting. It's going by real fast. Now, that's just a good lesson. And as David writes this, he says, "Show me, O Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Help me to always know how fleeting is my life." But David doesn't stop there. He goes on with his song. The first part of it is, show me how fleeting is my life, and always keep that in mind. But secondly, he goes on in verses 5 and 6, and he says, you have made my days a mere handbreadth. Now, what do we measure by hands? A horse's now, a lot of things used to be measured by hands, a handbreadth, a hand width. But he says, you have made my days, my life, it's just a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is as nothing before you. Each man's life is but a breath. Man is a mere phantom as he goes to and fro. He bustles about, but only in vain. He heaps up wealth, not knowing who will get it. Now, if David stopped here, life is fleeting and death is certain, this would be a depressing kind of song, wouldn't it? But somebody's got to say it once in a while, don't they? Somebody's got to get the sobering thought out there that our life here on this earth only lasts for a while. You understand, don't you, that when we're born, we all have some kind of an expiration date stamped on us. Everybody who is born has an ending somewhere out there. Now, I read a study in Reader's Digest some time ago, and that's about my attention span is Reader's Digest. And so I'm reading through there, and there's a Dr. David Shapiro that says he has done a study. He said, I've calculated the results, and here are my findings. He says, 1 out of every 1 person dies. I think it was a government-funded study. Okay, but 1 out of every 1 person dies. Now, that's another way of David saying death is certain for everybody who's ever lived. Life is fleeting. Death is certain. There's a friend of mine named Ralph that several years ago now was diagnosed with cancer. Ralph had a lot of Christian friends that prayed for him. He had some great doctors that worked on him. There's some great treatment, and that is a great combination. A lot of great prayers and some great medical care. Well, it turns out that Ralph was diagnosed later as being free from cancer. So Ralph went back to his doctor, and he told the doctor, Doc, I don't know how to thank you. You have saved my life. Now, the wise doctor ended up telling Ralph, he says, Ralph, I haven't saved your life. He says, what I've done is postponed your death. Now, is that a sobering thought? I haven't saved your life. What I've done is postponed your death. Now, regardless of what the commercials say from the fitness centers, that if you get a gym membership here, you're always going to be 23. Don't believe them. Okay, you'll not only not stay 23 the rest of your life, even if you take food supplements, even if you use the right makeup that reduces the appearance of fine wrinkles, no matter what you do, you get older. The hands of time only go one direction. And so, even if you live to be 100 years old, what does David say here? He says, the span of my years is as nothing before you. Now, I'd just like you to imagine with me for a minute, have you tried to imagine how long eternity is? That's a trick kind of a question because eternity isn't a certain amount of time. Instead of a timeline where you've got a beginning and an end, if you talk about eternity, you've got to draw arrows on each side of it because they continue out eternally. They continue to go out. But if you can imagine, just for sake of conversation, that in the human experience, as God created the heavens and the earth, and as God put people on this earth, there were people that God created in the beginning, and if eternity for us, let's say it had a beginning, it was somewhere in there, and if you live to be 100 years old. Let's let this blue piece of tape here represent your lifespan. How big a time span is 100 years when we're talking about eternity? How much further into the future do we go? And how many 100-year periods would we have in the span of eternity? When David says, my lifespan is as nothing before you, he wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't exaggerating. David says, life is fleeting. I think we'll all admit that. If you've lived any amount of time at all where you can look back and go, where did the time go? You know life is fleeting. We understand that death is certain. And like I said, if David's song ended here, that would be pretty depressing, wouldn't it? But he doesn't. He's got one last line here with this subject. He says, life is fleeting, death is certain, but now, Lord, what do I look for? And isn't that a great question? Life is fleeting, death is certain. So what do I look for? And his final line is, as he looks up, my hope is in you. I love David's wisdom here. David's lived long enough to know that the human spirit needs to hope. If we were living a hopeless life, how depressing that would be. But he understands that we're a poor bet when it comes to hope. Because I have people in my life that I put hope in. I bet you do too. I put hope in my doctor. Okay, I have a doctor that deals just with my rheumatoid arthritis. And he's given me pills, he's given me a regimen of things not to eat. Basically, if it tastes good, spit it out, that kind of a diet. But I put my hope in my doctor that he knows what he's talking about. He has wisdom in these things, and he's given me good advice, and I put my hope in my doctor, and I think that's good, but I understand that my doctor is limited, and doctors can even be fallible. That's why they carry what kind of insurance? Okay, malpractice insurance. There are mistakes made sometimes, and so even good doctors like that are limited in what they can do. I think one of the hardest conversations a doctor can have with a family is when they come to the waiting room and say, we have done all we can. Because there is a limit to what a doctor can do. I even put hope in politicians. Anybody else do that? If you vote on if you vote on a regular basis, you're showing hope in the political system and a hope in a politician. And every 2 to 4 years, there will be a candidate, there will be somebody, and I think they're going to keep their campaign promises. And every 2 to 4 years, I get disappointed because even politicians are fallible, aren't they? No matter what political party you're with, people are fallible and people are limited. What if Congress passed a law that said it's illegal to die? Can they enforce that? They could speed it up for you if they wanted to, but they can't enforce that kind of a law because there are things above them, things beyond them. People are fallible, people are limited. And so when David says, Lord, I know life is fleeting, I know death is certain, and I have an appointment eventually, what do I look for? My hope is in you. So as we come to that point in David's passage here, the challenge today is to think about your life. Now, when I say your life, don't look at your wife, your husband, anybody else around you. It's to think inside your own head. Think, how fleeting is my life? How much longer do I have here? And how do I want the here to be? How do I want it to continue? Do I want it to be just a regular rat race where You eat to work and work to eat and eat to work and work to eat? Or do you want your life to be full of purpose, full of meaning, and full of hope? Just think inside your own head. How fast is life going for you? And a lot of us have been here and had this thought. Kenny Chesney, David, they're not the first ones to think, how fast is life going? If you've ever stood in a dorm room and your baby is staying at college and you're going home, do you have that thought? Man, when I was leaving my youngest daughter at Milligan College years ago, we got back in the car and there was another country song came on. Alan Jackson has a song called Remember When. Whew. I'm trying to drive 85 on the interstate. I know, no judgment. And I've got tears in my eyes. My wife is crying. And she looks over at me and I just mutter, stupid song. You try to be tough. You try to get through those mile markers in life. And you go, she was just a little kid. How fast does life go? And what do you want to accomplish while you're here? What do you want your life to stand for? Because not only is life fleeting, there is an end to this life eventually. And where do you put your hope in this life and in the next? David says, Lord, show me often how fleeting is my life. In other words, while I've got time here, I've got to say the things that I need to say. It might be, please forgive me, it'll never happen again. I love you. Let's move on. It might be, you can trust me. You know, the words might be, I love you. Whatever words you need to say, don't put them off. Don't wait. The words need to come out now. Life is fleeting. Don't put it off because you need to do the things that need to be done now. If you're thinking about, I should send flowers, don't put it off. I should pay the compliment. Don't put it off. I should get serious with God. Don't put it off. As I've been the interim pastor here at Glenwood, I've seen several children make the decision early in their life they're going to live for the Lord. I know there's adults here that need to follow that same example and say, I do believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I'm ready to seal the deal. I'm ready to put the wedding ring on with God and be baptized into Christ and become His adopted child and know that my life here is secure and my future is secure. My hope is in you. There's a lady I knew in Beaver City, Nebraska when I came right out of Bible college. My family and I moved to this little town of 800 people, a little farming community in south central Nebraska. Shortly after we moved there, I met Ben and Mary Fletcher. Ben died that first year I was there. He'd farmed his whole life, and Mary decided she's going to stay on the farm, and she's going to keep farming as much as she could. I got to know Mary. We were good friends. I'd stop, I'd pray with Mary. We had just had a great friendship. Well, she called me several years later after her husband had passed, and she says, Jim, I need to talk to you. The doctor says I have lung cancer. I wasted no time getting out to see Mary. We sat at the kitchen table. She cried, I cried, and we talked about life. But Mary's a strong lady. She was so strong. She said, Jim, all my life I've shown my kids how to live. Now I'm going to show them how to die. And I thought, what a statement. She's making everything count in her life. She's living with hope. She's living with purpose. She's living with a plan. And her plan continued on after her life in this body. Her plan continued on to, I'm going home to meet the Lord. I'll see Ben again. She had it laid out, and I thought, that's what I want. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, the Apostle Paul, as he's leaving this life, he knows he's about to die, and he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And I thought, that's how I want to go. Just like David, understanding these three things. Life is fleeting. Death is certain. But my hope is in the Lord. You know, every Sunday as we come here, one thing we do at the Glenwood Church at Reconnect is we have communion. And if you've come from a different denominational background, you might wonder, why do you do it so often? You know, when you do things often like that, they're not near as special. And I say, tell your wife that as you kiss her, okay? Certain things that you do often become more dear, and they become more special. Every week as we come together and have some time with the Lord, the one who gives us hope, the one who was born, ministered, was put on the cross for us to pay the penalty for our sin and then rose from the dead, the one who said, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come and take you with me so that where I am, there you may be also. That's the one we spend time with now. And so as I pray, I hope you're praying as well. And I hope you're just pulling some walls around you so it's just you and the Lord, and you know that your brothers and sisters in the room that love the Lord are doing the same thing. And I hope you'll be thinking about the Lord that loves you and knows that your life is fleeting. Your physical death is imminent, but He's got a place for us, and we put our hope in Him. Father, I thank you for investing so much in us. You love us beyond what we can even understand. I think the closest we can come to is the love we have for our family, our children. We lay down our life for them, and you've laid down your life for us. So as we think about the cross, and we think about the empty tomb, and we think about heaven, I pray that you'll just work miraculous things in our mind and in our heart as we stare at this broken body and this shed blood this morning and understand your deep, deep love for us. We ask you to help us and guide us as we continue forward in this short life. In Jesus' name, amen.